Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Aquatik Esports coaching camp. I am Mecca, the head director of Overwatch at Aquatik Esports, and now I will let the coaches introduce themselves. We can start out with QZY.
Hello, everybody. My name is QC, and I'm coaching Aquatic Meta right now. I've been coaching like 4 or 5 for I think 6, 7 months right now, and I'm excited to help you guys learn.
For those of you that don't know me, I'm Summer. I'm an ex-Contenders Australia head coach and also a previous head coach for OT Pog in EU Gauntlet. I've had about a year or, well, 2.5 years, if not more, team coaching, and I've done hundreds of hours of one-on-one coaching with every SR from literally bottom 500 to people rank 10, rank 1.
Good shit.
And now we will be accepting questions. If you raise your hand in the chat, and I will allow you guys to join the call with me. We will be doing one at a time, so yeah. If you guys have any questions, just raise your hand. There's one. Legacy. Let's go with Pina first. So La Pina is gonna come in and speak. You need to accept them right now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I was wondering about by coaching someone that has a higher SR, like a lot of people don't respect you when they have higher SR than you. So how do you deal with that?
Me, QZ, if you want to go first. Then.
Yeah. Well, in my experience, having them have you take an individual water review without revealing your SR first. If they already know about it, that's fine. You just kind of have to explain, kind of in gameplay terms, why you are worthy to coach them and stuff like that. Because I know a lot of people have inflated egos at higher ranks, and that's pretty obvious if someone's not letting you coach them when they're a lower SR, right? But you have to just kind of prove, in my opinion, and show them why you're qualified to coach them in a way, like giving them tips on what they did wrong, right? Like asking them questions like, "What do you think you did wrong here?" and then pointing out what you see, right? Pointing out different mistakes, right? Because showing people that you have a fresh perspective on their gameplay can really help, in my opinion. I know a lot of the highest level coaches, right? Some of them are high SR, some of them are not, right? But that doesn't really matter at that level, right? Just a different perspective and showing them what they did wrong and how to improve really just drives the players in a way and shows them a lot of respect for the coaches, if you get what I mean.
For me personally, I've always, again, used my experience to fall on. People have always come to me and asked me questions, and I've always said to people, I've used previous experience with people and just said, hey, look, they've found use in it. You kind of almost, in a weird way, I feel like you kind of just flex what you've done before to people, and you just say, in a nice way, obviously, and you just say to people, hey, look, this is what I've done previously. This is what people thought of me. Um, Especially if you're doing a lot of one-on-one stuff at the start, reviews are always a great thing to have if you have your own coaching Discord or whatever. Just so people can see, okay, well, even though they are plat, diamond, masters, bronze for all I care, um, you know, people have seen improvement. So that's I find is a good way to start. Is always having a review section and have people just kind of spread the word of mouth that hey, this guy was a good coach.
Does that answer your question, Pina?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. How do I move you back now? Move to audience. Thank you for asking your question. Now we will accept Blackser speak.
You should be able to hear me now. There's one major question that I really had for a while. It was about like coaching mainly Diamond Masters teams because like whenever I would like share my at least I think so high tier like game knowledge that I've collected over the years of playing Overwatch to like lower SR players, I feel like when I like explain a lot or go really in depth, I feel like they don't actually apply that into their gameplay. And the major question that I really had today was like, how do I help, mainly Diamond and Masters players, apply that game knowledge that I gave to them? Because some, obviously some players have really bad habits, and it takes a while for them to learn how to play better. And for one example, I had this main tank player who had a really hard time knowing when to go in, when to go out, when to shield, use abilities, stuff like that. So it was really hard for me to coach him. He said that I did a good job coaching, but I believe me as a coach that I didn't do too well because I wasn't able to help him apply when he had those bad habits and stuff like that.
Selma, do you want to go first?
So in terms of like bad habits and trying to, so a lot of what I do is kind of based on, I base a lot of my coaching and stuff on kind of sports techniques, which I'll talk about in my lecture later. But I think it's about finding like meaningful ways that they can incorporate what you're trying to say. So obviously you can say things, but you try not to overcomplicate things and over direct things. That makes sense. Try not to like make things really, really targeted. Try and widen it to something that's a kind of, even if it's not necessarily a massive problem, something that might be a wider issue, and then look to just like you can slowly build it up. I think, especially if people don't take things on necessarily, or you feel like you're not doing a great job, that's obviously a problem sometimes. But like, feel I mean, if people are struggling to get or like apply concepts, then I think you need to find either a different way or like a more creative way that like tailors it to a player more, if you can, especially if you know players well. And in that kind of diamond to masters SR, normally uncomplicating things a little bit and even giving like a small demo or giving them clips of a good demo and telling them to just like do this one thing and wait for them to see improvement. That tends to be a good thing to go for me.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you a question, and this is gonna lead into another thing, but when you like try to implement stuff, do you kind of go over one thing at a time, or do you try to like go through a VOD review and point out each mistake that they make and then like tell them what to fix and stuff like that? Or like how do you kind of work your VOD reviews and try to improve people?
Usually in my VOD reviews, I kind of look at either I look at one major topic that we can go over, like for example, initiations with ultimates, for example, using too much ultimates. Sometimes I focus on certain topics than others, but I think in my early days of coaching that I did focus on mistakes a little bit too much, and I know that when you focus on each and you just label every mistake, it's not necessarily gonna have the player improve. So I probably was, honestly labeling their mistakes a little bit too much. But I think mainly what I try to focus on, at least now, is like certain topics and subjects rather than just each individual mistake. Obviously, like if it's a major mistake that costed them the team fight, I'll like mention it, but then I'll mention like as a team what they can do better next time.
So that's good. For like, if you're gonna go for specific topics and stuff like that, what I like to do is simplify that down even more, like Sama said. But I'll give an example for mine. I when was going over a main tank with like fight planning and stuff like that, and what I did is that they were struggling to express their thoughts into words, like express what they wanted to do. So I gave them kind of a formula to go by saying like the 5 Ws, like who, what, where, and why, when they're explaining a fight plan and stuff like that, right? Giving them kind of like turning the concept of something they're trying to execute into like a little bit of a cheat sheet in a way, I think helps a lot of players, especially lower SR players, like grasp the concept a lot more. Also, going through like their individual VODs and seeing like the mistakes they're making, and then finding higher SR VODs and comparing their gameplay to like the higher SR gameplay is very, very good. Like, for example,
Yeah.
if they're struggling on like engages and stuff like that, right? You can go into the Owl Viewer and then show them what an actual engage looks like and explain why that engage works and what they need to look for and stuff like that, rather than just kind of trying to explain through them like through words in their own gameplay, relate that to other gameplay as well, so that they have an example. Because a lot of people are visual learners.
I think I find more success in like obviously like solo voting with another player because then you get to learn about like their thought process and what they were thinking and stuff like that, and I actually am able to help them a lot better because like I'm looking at like a player type POV, and in one of VODs you can focus on one-on-one POV of the player a lot more and see what they can do better. I think in team VODs I do decent but I feel like I could definitely like learn a lot better to simplify topics so that everyone on the team knows, or at least the tank line knows or the support line knows and stuff like that.
So are you having trouble with like individual VODs or team VODs? More or less team VODs, I think, right?
I think mainly team VODs, yeah, because I think when I VOD people like one on one, they actually like implement it and do a lot better.
Okay.
I think a lot of people learning is still them feeling a difference or you showing them how to make that difference. And when they start to feel a difference, that's when things happen. So if the first kind of method of talking to people and saying, hey, this is how you do it doesn't work, I tend to find that you just have to be more creative in how you tell them it. I'm one for the people that like are here and have listened to me before. I'm one for anecdotes for explaining things and telling people, okay, it's kind of like this if you play this sport, or it's like this. Trying to find different kind of pulling from reality and telling people this is what it's like, or this is kind of what you have to do. Obviously, yes, you can show high level, but there's a point where high level kind of phases away from lower tier players. So telling them what it is, showing them an example from yourself, and then showing them an example from Owl that then just concretes it that a high level player would do that. So say a player or a team are struggling with tempo, I'm going to show them a team that can tempo within their SR range if I have that available to me, or I'll show them myself or from VODs or whatever, me scrimming or something like that, or even rank codes of me when they're good. And then I'll show a 4-4, 4-5 main tank doing it, and then just kind of compounding it after one after the other. That tends to be a good way to get teams to understand, or just thinking of a more creative way to explain what you're trying to say.
Yeah, that actually answers my question pretty well. Thank you.
Thank you, Blocks, for asking your question. And next, Metal, if you want to introduce yourself now, go ahead.
Hey, I am Coach Metal. I am the head coach for Fresno State 4445. I also help with Manta as assistant coach. Yeah, I've been coaching for about 3.5 years. Multiple GM teams, hopping around, just enjoy watching people grow. So.
Nice. Next up we have Nebula to talk.
Hey all. I'm Rogue. I've been coaching a team for a few years now that spans from, at this point, like silver to diamond. Some of them are peaking. So obviously there's a wide kind of range of skill and experience there. And 1v1s, one-on-one coaching, it's fine because I can kind of work with them. But on the team level, sometimes it's difficult to get all the players on the same page, right? To keep the coaching that I'm giving them accessible and relevant to all of them with their different skills at the game. So I'm not, planning on breaking up this team to get them into more tightly clustered SR teams because the team, likes each other and doesn't really want to do that. But I'm wondering if you have any advice on keeping coaching accessible to a team that is not necessarily all on the same skill level and keeping everyone on the same page and unified.
I think Metal should answer this question.
Well, I think what should actually probably happen to begin with, at least if I were to take over a team, I would sit them down, get them all on the same page in general before you ever really get onto the field, right? Before you ever actually play the game of Overwatch, I like to make sure we're all mentally in it together and wanting to play together, get all your ducks in a row, and then from there in VOD footage, you are making sure that your tank line is engaging together, making sure your DPS is engaging together. And if not, then you need to pause those situations and really draw it out for them. And making sure that everything is team game, right? And if you're taking really long rotations or you're not engaging with your front line, you're not communicating, right? A lot of this is communication as well. So if you're not breaking those things down and really trying to find where we need to improve, that is what's going to kind of be a thorn in your side. So if it's a DPS not listening correctly or a tank not calling their engagements, a lot of it has to do with communication. And then from there, you can work on the individual players, helping their engage timing a little bit. But yeah, for the most part, it's communication.
mixed SR roster, normally, obviously trying to get them on the same page is great, but I understand that that's obviously sometimes not an option. I think trying to get the higher level players to communicate with the lower players, and if they spot a mistake, just politely say, I think you could do this better, because a lot of the time they're going to have a greater impact on each other than you might have on a team. So try and get the higher level players to say what they feel isn't happening, and then try and pull those slightly lower players up and say to them, hey, this is what your team doesn't think is happening. Can we work on this? Right? And try and get the higher players to understand why the lower players are struggling, and then to try and just help each other. Because a lot of the issues might come with kind of, okay, well, this player knows to do this, but this player is a lower SR player and doesn't know how to do that, but I don't want to bore the high level players. So try and get the high level players involved in teaching the lower level players and get each other kind of, it builds a closer knit family as well, but it also is just like that kind of, they've obviously learned something from climbing, so they can share that knowledge as well and passing down that idea of, yes, you're the coach, but there's things that are just better left to let each other try and explain. Right? Can you maybe try this next fight or try that next fight? Coming from a higher player is often something I found that is a viable way to engage slightly lower elo players.
This is definitely something that happens at a collegiate level too. So especially in collegiate level, you're going to find a lot of higher SRs mixed in with the lower SRs. So yeah, I do agree. I have leaned on the higher SRs to help the lower SRs. So that is a good idea.
I agree. I just want you to, like, if you're gonna do that and implement like the higher SR players to speak with the lower SR players, you need to make sure that you're moderating that and not letting it get too out of hand where like the SR displacement starts to create like a rift in the team because they're acting kind of superior in a way, right? You just need to make sure you're moderating that.
Definitely need to moderate it. Even correct players if you feel like it's not something that's right, but just try and let it happen and let players adjust to that accordingly. If it's really wrong, then you say, hey, I don't think that's right. But again, input or add yourself in accordingly.
And when you're moderating, team meetings are important, right? Like setting them all down, making sure they're conversating, not just in the game. You need that quality hour and a half to really sit down and go through the mentals of the players and let each of the players kind of voice their frustrations if they do have them, because it helps everybody on the team.
Cool.
Does that answer your question?
Thank you all. Yes, that's great. Thank
Cool.
you.
Thank you, Nebula. Move you, and then next up we got Taki.
Hello there.
Hello.
Okay, so my question is, now this can be, I would like some elaboration because people talk about macro and micro coaching. What is the difference between the two when you're talking to a team or individuals?
Micro and macro for a team, I tend to find are similar, but macro is something that applies to the whole team in terms of like a comm structure or like a rotation. And micro within a team is something that's a very hero specific that has a wider impact onto the team. So like a Rhine's positioning is micro to the Rhine, but because it's in a team environment, it impacts everybody around the Rhine, right? Because he's the leader, so that would be micro within a team environment. And macro would be something that is a kind of blanket cover across the whole team, e.g. a comm structure or rotations or alt economy. Those are kind of like macro concepts, and then micro would be taking a deeper dive into one specific hero, but it will still have an impact, right? It's not something they have to actively think about, but it's something that kind of will impact people.
Would it be almost like a layering beat and immortality field so that they don't get used at the same time? Would that be a micro management?
Likely, yeah. would likely be a micro of the Lucio and a micro of the Baptiste, or it could be a macro if you wanted to. It will depend really. You don't tend to label things differently when you do coaching, but if you wanted to conceptualize it, I feel like it could be both, right? Because you could micro the Lucio to not beat, or you could micro the Baptiste to call his lamp, but that would be it. Or you can tell as a blanket macro concept, you can talk about ult tracking or fight planning, right? Which is where beat and lamp would come in. So it depends on where you want to take it. I don't think it has a very distinct label that you can give it. I think it's just kind of what you feel like needs addressing first, or more importantly.
I agree.
I
I mean,
don't
that's
know.
and then in like team VODs, right? Like if you're doing all six, you're a whole team. You're generally covering like macro, like the whole team concept of rotations, all decon, comps, understanding what everybody's trying to accomplish as a team, and then on one-on-ones, you're generally doing a lot of micro positioning, personal alt usage, uh, abilities, all that stuff.
And then I think if you wanted to kind of be distinct about individuals, I think a lot of it is micro. But again, you can start to build in macro concepts into individual players so that if they do join a team, then they have that experience, or a macro concept of the game in general. So these will be understanding things that, such as the importance of this or how a comp works. That would be macroing a player. And then the micro would be looking at individual things like cooldown usage or, smaller adjusts to kind of bigger positioning errors, things like that. They tend to be more micro.
I said that macro part because macro is important because I do believe the more macro you do on a one-on-one, it actually helps their decision making overall going into the future. A lot of universal concepts that they can utilize.
So macro is just more universal kind of Overwatch functions, and then micro tends to be more just kind of player or hero specifics.
Yeah. If you're gonna go over like micro, like a team VOD scenario, kind of ask them why they're doing it or like what they want to do. Like say if they're taking like a flank as a DPS character or something, kind of ask them why they're doing it and like tell them to explain that to the team so that they understand, and then explain that in a macro sense why either you should or shouldn't do that to the team, right? So that everyone's on the same page. Does that answer your question? Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that's very, very good. I often got them confused whenever people said like when people would say, "Oh, do you want micro coaching?" or I have experience in macro, a little micro, and I just don't know what that meant. And I think it'll help me figure out how to VOD review in the future as well.
Thank you for asking your question. Next up is Captain Firebeard.
Hello. I don't really have coach experience. I'm mostly on the other end, but like, I always kind of want to ask this. So for like team, there's a difference, as we know, there's a difference between like teams and 1-on-1. I guess my question is like, how do you keep a team VOD review central without it without it kind of like risking turning into a hit piece for one person? I guess my question kind of is.
You should have a kind of a clear idea of what you're going to go over in a team VOD review before you even like look at the VODs to review it before anything, right? Like you should kind of know what the problem is and then look through the VODs to find examples of the said problem, right? Before you do anything, right? You don't want to really go through the VOD and just kind of point out mistakes over and over and over and over again, right? Because that's when it starts to turn into like a hit piece, right? Just pointing out a few errors and stuff like that, and like kind of core concept like, well, we're engaging wrong or something. Well, why are we engaging wrong? And then you're looking at that, and then you see why you're engaging wrong. So then you explain it to the team and show them how to fix it, rather than kind of going through every single example of when they engaged wrong and then pointing out why they did it, right? Because that's kind of when you layer on the like, okay, well, you did this wrong, and then you did this wrong again, and then you kept doing it wrong, right? And they kind of, their mindset gets weaker and weaker, and then you're just kind of hitting on them at that point. So.
I think it also depends on the players you're working with. So my style of coaching tends to end up as a hit piece for a lot of players. or problems in general. So I think blend that well if you're looking to coach or just like help a coach. Look at the kind of like, if it's an issue you've said before, this is an issue. This is an issue. We need to fix this, and things don't happen. Then, getting players to recite their mistakes, it doesn't become a hit piece when you're kind of trying to prove a point. So for anyone that's kind of done VODs with me, I start picking out the same mistakes, and eventually at one point you'll start picking out your own mistakes. And for me, that's not me making it into a hit piece. That's you discovering what your issues are and noticing them when you make them. And that's what I feel like a lot of coaches do when they play the game as well, is we'll notice our own mistakes. And I think that's a kind of core bit of learning as well, is just noticing your own mistakes yourself so that you start to correct them, because no matter how many times I tell you, most of the time you probably ignore me. So if you start recognizing your own mistakes, then it's not you ignoring me anymore, it's you consciously thinking about things. So I think it's being adaptable as a coach to the environment around you. And obviously some teams it won't be acceptable and you have to change it, but I think you just have to be open to adapt.
I think on a macro scale, where you're doing the whole team, I try to stay a little bit away from it. If it's repeated mistakes, they get the concept. We kind of explain it on a macro scale, but on an individual scale, I kind of do what Sama does. I make it a hit piece too, because at the end of the VOD, I want to run it home a concept that is losing you a tremendous amount of value, right? So if you make it to the point where they view their footage back again and they cringe at the end, then you've accomplished something, right? Because they see their mistake visually, and it will not traumatize them, but in a way it'll really affect them to the point where it'll help the decision making later on. So
Yeah. For individual VOD reviews, I do the same thing, right? I'm just not talking about like team macro VOD reviews.
Yeah,
right?
the team,
Once
I
you kind
think
of
you just
explain it once, and like a couple times after that, you don't need it. It just gets repetitive, right? Like it's
Yeah. Teams you tend to prep and avoid like hard microing somebody, so you can add micro fundamentals in. Like this wasn't a great position for our honor because of this, but don't go too in depth into explaining exactly the fix for it. Trying to say this positioning could have been better. You could have moved this direction and then move on, rather than going, right, honor, this was shit, and you need to move over here and stand here. Right, that feels like a hit piece, rather than saying, okay, your honor, this position wasn't great. Can you see you don't have LOS? Where could you have moved to? That sounds less like a hit piece. And then every time you say honor or have like a keyword with your honor or your player, and they can point out their own mistakes as well. So trying to avoid kind of hard macroing as well is also just a good idea in kind of team VODs, to avoid that kind of feeling that you're just aiming at one person.
and then if you go over the same concept, like the same macro concepts over and over, it's kind of like beating a dead horse. And like somebody had already said, it does really bring the team down in general. So you want to try to hit as many concepts as you can.
That answers my questions. Thank you very much.
Next up, we got Dirty No, I don't know how to say his name.
Just no.
I just invited you. Oh, yeah.
I had to find the accept thing. So my question is around like improvement as a coach. I'm trying to jump from coaching a team that scrims like at max 3.4 to kind of like 4K, 4.4K up to. I want to like I tend to struggle. I have ADHD, so I tend to struggle staying focused throughout like an entire scrim on certain things. I'm thinking like, are there any kinds of things that you did that were more like drills for yourself as a coach that you could do like throughout the day at different times? Like, let's say I'll spend like 10, 20 minutes doing this one thing, focusing on this one concept so I can understand it better, so then I can then explain it to my players better. Does that make sense?
By teaching it to someone who doesn't care, especially if you're trying to learn things, So for me, take when Double Bubble was first introduced to me, you know, I was blown away by this. So I spent 10 minutes, I spent hours just looking back over this same VOD where it was my team just getting hard stomped by this weird comp, by some Koreans playing this weird comp I'd never seen. And, eventually you start to just pick things out that are key and then try and just find somebody in a server just to say, hey, look, I learned this new concept. Try and teach someone who doesn't care to understand. And that tends to be a good way to do it. What I found to do it was just to watch and watch and watch and try and just pick bits out and note them down. Okay, this is how they engage every time. This is how they do it every time, and pick out just like, okay, well, what's the key factor here? And looking for win conditions, especially if you're learning new concepts, looking for why it's important, why does it impact a fight, and then you'll start to learn more and more how the concept works. And just experience, right? The more people you teach it, you'll start to alter it and find better ways to do it.
My son has ADD, and I feel the best way to teach him is in increments. So what I would suggest is probably sit down. If the video is 30 minutes long or so, sit down for 10 minutes and hard focus, write notes, right? Pick like Sana said, pick out the details, what you feel is very important, and take a break, right? And then another 10 minutes. Just kind of split it in three if it's like a half hour long. And also quality content, right? Making sure you're getting that quality information from the correct sources is also very important. So you can pick those details out.
Yeah, I think to add to Metal's point, I think coaching under someone who has a very, very good understanding of the game is very, very important and can help you grow very, very fast. Right, like apprenticing under like a high level coach is really, really important, and that's what I did for a long time. Right, the person that I apprentice under is Contenders now. He's on Malice. I don't know to flex or anything, but like he was really, really good, and because I apprenticed under him, I learned the game very, very, very fast. Right, and now I'm coaching at a decently high level. Right, just understanding what went through his brain and then applying that to my own knowledge is really, really helpful. So that's something that you could look at doing maybe.
I think I'm a very like routine based kind of goal oriented person, like learning wise. So it's like something like, let's say, watching like contenders VODs in increments of like 10-15 minutes and trying like set goals for myself to notice certain things, stuff like that.
Find things you enjoy first as well. Find
Yep.
lots of things you enjoy first and break those down into 10-15 minutes and then write down what the concept is. Like find examples, so either through, asking a coach for a couple of codes from a scrim that you watched or things like that. Just like look for things that you find interesting. So for me, obviously, I like watching Double Bubble and understanding that to its fullest. And then, you might like something else. So look for things you do enjoy as well.
I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dirty. Next up we got is Aiden.
Like a dead.
Mecca's
He's
dead.
just muted. He's just muted.
Choosy. Oh, my bad. I was muted.
Hello.
Hello.
Are we allowed to ask multiple questions by any chance, or
Yeah.
just keep it one at a time?
No, you're good.
Okay. My first question would be, as a coach, have you guys personally hit roadblocks? And if you have, what do you do to yourself to keep feeling the improvement, keep progressing forward?
Personally, I think I'm at a pretty big roadblock right now. What I'm doing, right? I feel like no matter what I do, right, it's like what's really hard to improve your coaching knowledge, right? Because you're not really coaching with anyone. You're just kind of helping a team improve, getting ready for like open division stuff like that, or whatever you're doing. I think a very, very good way to like get yourself out of that is kind of just having a set goal with a team in a way, right? Like, okay, well, I can help this team look over blank. Like I can help them improve their alt rotations or something like that, right? That gives you a concrete goal. And then because of that, you can look at what good like alt rotations are and stuff like that. And then because you're looking at like better like teams or like there are comms for like all rotations, you'll be like, okay, well, how do they accomplish this? And then you'll start to think about it, and then because of that, you'll start implementing it into like your own coaching and stuff like that. And I think it'll make you a lot better.
For me, when I hit a roadblock, if it's in teaching somebody or teaching a concept, specifically certain heroes that I know I'm not good at, so knowing your weaknesses for one, like helps through roadblock because you can identify them quickly rather than like dwelling in in that roadblock state. And also like not being scared to ask people who you think are as knowledgeable. Like don't be scared to, I don't know, ask a friend who's also a coach who you think would know the answer, or like passing things on and then learning from them as well. And also like if you have a certain type of like content that you consume or watch, right? Try just like changing up the concept or the content you consume as well. Look at different people, look at other points of view as well. Like a lot of coaches, a couple of like high level coaches, they'll stream or they'll look at VODs and things like that. Just like go and find another coach to watch, or go and find another team to watch if you can. So when I hit a roadblock, I started just like messing around with a lot of different teams and just like seeing what I could get to stick and what kind of fit me. And like trying different things is always a good thing as well when you hit a roadblock. Just trying like just diversifying as much as you can to try and find a different way through. It's always kind of worked for me.
Wonderful answer, in my opinion. I think, especially networking with other high level coaches, just get your foot in the door, say hi, introduce yourself, right? I think even at one time I messaged Sama way back in the day, and I just found every high level coach that I could possibly find, absorb information, have quality conversations, and now at the high level that I'm at too, I still bounce off. Like, don't ever put yourself above anybody else. Always stay humble, absorb information, and you will skyrocket. Don't think that your shit don't stink, because that's the moment you stop improving as a coach. And also take into consideration there's more than just Overwatch, right? That learn how to become a better coach. And like research Phil Jackson and his concepts. Research other coaching philosophies. Fill out a coaching philosophy yourself. Figure out who you are as a coach. As a coach, I exist to answer those questions. What are your core values, right? How do you want to coach a team? What does that look like to you? Those are all quality things you can still improve as a head coach without even really taking Overwatch into consideration. Those are really impactful things. You can bring a team together and have them playing out of their minds, and to coach a little bit of Overwatch, but still have a huge amount of inspiration coming from your side and support in general, because you learned how to become a coach, like a quality head coach, before you learn the Overwatch side as well. So there's multiple aspects you can be improving from to be an actual esports coach, right? Or even an Overwatch coach. So
Yeah, from in a kind of perspective as well, in terms of a little story, when I started coaching under a big org, we had a couple of coaches, and I'll name drop him. I had a coach. There was a coach called Usalis, and he's retired now. I catch up with him sometimes, but I used to just, whenever I saw a problem, I'd think of an idea or a way to fix it that was very basic, and just like drop him a DM and like, what do you think? Yeah, yeah. I think most coaches will give you an ego, but there are a lot of good coaches out there who will respond to your DMs and happily help you. Um, just like find someone who's coaching that doesn't mind being messaged. Just throw everything at them. Yeah, any concept or anything. Don't be scared to just ask people questions. I
you
know a
know
lot
what?
of
Funny.
coaches that are like attached to their computers, and the minute you drop them a DM and it's from someone, specifically myself, if you drop me a DM and it's from someone I don't know and you're asking me questions, I'm happy to talk to you all day, every day, right? Um,
I'm pretty much the
coaches
same way.
coaches love their knowledge and they just want to share a lot of the time. Like it's almost like an oversharing relationship, so don't be scared to ask people.
You know what's funny? Every coach that I've confided in and spoke to and asked questions to, you generally answer the question yourself. So good coaches will actually make you self-reflect and make you use your knowledge. And when you do, you end up answering the question yourself. And that's the best way to kind of help a lower level coach, especially.
Got you. I have a quick follow-up question. Thank you, by the way. So you guys were definitely, obviously, like you guys are resources, and that kind of stuff in terms of connections and people to reach out to and talk to. But what do you recommend for like broadening your connections?
As much as I hate to say it, um, look to jump into like bigger orgs that will have some of these weirdly high level coaches like thrown in. So Aquatik here they have a couple of coaches that are really high levels, some varying levels. Like jump into a couple, even like ringing for scrims and meeting other coaches through like ringing for scrims and like playing the game and talking to other people that way. Get involved in a community is how I started making friends. And then once you're on teams and you start having assistant coaches, head coaches, things like that, right, then you obviously have a direct connection with someone. I found at the start, I hate orgs in general normally, but at the start, I found it's a decent way to get into connections, or even just like finding a coach who's streaming and just like talking to them, like coach to coach. Um, I've dropped into a couple of coaches' streams just to say hi and like give my opinion on what they're saying. And I've had a couple of them, just DM me and say hi. It's cool to have another opinion. So like, don't be scared to give your opinion to coaches as well. If especially somewhere like Twitter, or you see them post something on like a forum or something, not being scared to just DM them and say, "Hey, I don't think this is right. Here's why." Have a conversation with them. Some coaches will tell you to fuck off, but that's that, right?
I networked my butt off when I first started coaching. I messaged everybody from Careless, Sama, all the collegiate coaches. I mean, every coach I could get my hands on, I just introduced myself to. And I said hi, and I found the quality ones. Careless was as I was coming up in the ranks. Careless was a fantastic coach to talk to. I mean, he was so knowledgeable and would answer every question I had. So that was one of my coaches I had very often help me through a lot. So
Sweet, thank you guys. Sorry for taking up so much time. I have one more quick question.
Go for it.
When breaking into, like, I'm trying to break into the tier 3 scene, how would you recommend doing that? Would it be going into an assistant coach for a bigger org for a more known team, or would it be ideally like earning your own with a team that you're working with?
For T3, if you're looking at like breaking into kind of like higher levels of OD,
Mhm.
especially if you have access to things like DOW where people are looking for projects, again, it's kind of that no fear idea. If you see a project that's kind of like, or you see some names, or they're looking for people, these higher level projects that post in certain channels. If you see a project that looks slightly kind of offbeat or anything like that, just like trialing for lots of projects and seeing if you can get one to stick. I tend to avoid orgs for like T3 projects because orgs with lots of teams tend to over prioritize and do things that I don't enjoy, but you can look for them. I think just looking for projects and putting yourself out there and seeing if people will take you to start with is a good start. And don't be disheartened by like not getting the offers you thought you would get, right? Like take one or two to start with, see if that's your level and see how far you can go. Definitely having your own team to like put a name to though is a good start as well.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, Aiden. Next up is Pina again. You're muted, Pina, if you're talking.
Sorry. uh, so I want to ask about having like a player that has like a suboptimal playstyle, let's say, and that wants to improve, but it doesn't want to change his playstyle. Like I know a gold player that it was really suicidal with his playstyle, going for trades, going like, and he wanted to improve, but he didn't want to stop doing that, stop just going into the enemy nonstop. So I don't know, I was thinking if you have like something to do, if there's like something that you can do there, or just leave it.
Try and cater to it as much as you can. So say if it's an Ana player that's like super aggressive, try and show them like when and where to apply their aggression, rather than saying, "Hey, don't be this aggressive. You need to back up." Show them that there are points in the game where their aggression is really warranted. So say it's an Ana player that's always like, super close to the fight and saying they're always wanting to look for a nade or something like that, right? Show them the correct position to be where they can be both aggressive and do the right thing at the same time. To as much as you can, obviously sometimes it's not possible, but say it's a McCree that's always flanking, well, show them when the right type to flank would be, right? And things like that. Show them kind of try and cater towards it, push, because there are obviously different styles of playing and it will adapt depending. There are things that obviously you can do that are better or worse, but try and like cater yourself to them, show them ways of doing it, but that you can almost gently pull them back to what you want. Right, so say a McCree that's always on the flank, show him how to flank, or what on the flank he's doing wrong, and then tell them when to flank. Okay, so you went really early here, and the whole team was focused on you. Maybe stand behind a shield for a couple of seconds, wait for the fight to happen a bit more, and then go for that flank, right? So just trying to like show them when and where the right time to do the wrong thing is, and that tends to be an improvement as well.
That's a good answer.
I'm stealing your thunder, sorry, Metal.
No. It's okay. I got family here, so it's a little chaotic right now. So I definitely don't have much to say to that. That was really good.
Does that answer your question, Pino?
Yeah, thank you.
Next up, we got Nebula again.
Hello all. So I've been a head coach in my team for a few years now, mostly solo coach through that time. And I've had a few assistant coaches come through, but I've realized that I've had a lot of difficulty just kind of relinquishing control, I guess, of stuff to them, like trusting them to give the right advice to the team. I kind of feel like I disagree with them a lot, and I don't know how to, trust them more. So I'm not saying that's healthy. I'm not saying that's what's best for the team, but I just wonder if you have advice on kind of working with your other coaches who maybe don't have the same ideas as you, and just learning to be less possessive, I guess, of your team.
I'm
That's
probably
something
the wrong person to ask.
That's something I could
Yes.
reside with, honestly, because I've been head coach for Fresno State for a while, and I have an assistant coach, and what you really should do though when you're hiring on an assistant coach is do a pre-screening, right? Ask the right questions. How would you deal with this situation? How do you believe you what are your morals? All that stuff, right? All those important questions that you need to know so that your assistant coach will be on the same page as you. So when you're faced with difficult situations, or in a certain meta you feel like you should be playing this way, you need to have that proper communication. It needs to be constant communication between you and your assistant coach if you do plan on relinquishing some of that control. And a lot of that control comes from you want things to go your way, but if you want things to go your way, that communication needs to be constant, because if you drop that communication, you're most likely not always on the same page that way. But I get the relinquishing control thing. I definitely understand it. I have an amazing assistant coach at Fresno State, a really quality guy that has nothing but pure intentions. And it took me a little bit, but it just also made me realize that I have to communicate a lot more.
I haven't really worked like with a lot of assistant coaches in my time, and normally when I do work with assistant coaches, they tend to be people I've previously had like a relationship doing other things with, but I think it is difficult to relinquish control. Try and get them in an environment where you can like almost just kind of backhand monitor it, I guess, if that makes sense. Like you can just kind of watch gently, and then you can obviously it's hard to push people to be like you. I think that's what a lot of the problem might be, is you just feel like, your coaching is good enough, and sometimes it's just good to try and listen to what other people have to say. And if you don't believe in it, then give a good argument. I'm always one personally. I'm one for if I don't know, the other day on Twitter specifically with Careless, I had a big rant about staggering in scrims and things like that. Just having a good argument sometimes is really good to help you understand other people as well.
Cool. That's good advice. Thanks all.
Next up we got is GTB.
Hello. Sure.
Oh.
Well, sorry, I want to just thank you guys for doing this. It's actually really fucking cool. Uh, my question is, how do you guys manage your like work and like Overwatch like coaching life, right? Working. I don't know if you guys actually work or if this is your main job, but like how do you manage that?
Wish this was my main job. Imagine making money.
Yeah, same here.
I mean, I work at the university that I coach at in IT. So I also have kind of like a 9 to 5 wife and kids, all that stuff, right? And it's just really making sure your priorities are straight. So, you're obviously family comes first, then job, the game of Overwatch, but you have to prioritize your time, right? You can't just like throw random VODs in at random times. It has to be structured, and you have to make sure that you're being communicative with your family, being communicative, making sure that you're working around the your work and just allotting your time correctly. Because if you're throwing your time everywhere, it's going to be very hard to balance everything, and your mental is going to get a little out of whack that way.
Yeah, make sure. So I work at a pub, but I work on a so I'm in the EU, so I work on. So normally when I come back from work late at night, I'll jump straight into scrims, and then obviously I have that time before people wake up to prep stuff. But I think a lot of it is just don't overload yourself, right? Get comfortable with one, maybe two kind of like roles and try not to overload yourself. And when you feel like you are about to get overloaded, if you've kind of taken on an extra thing, sometimes you just have to give up things and don't be scared to. I think also try not to make, all your time Overwatch related as well. Even if you have free time, try not to always commit it to like coaching or Overwatch. Try and find something else to do. Even if it's just playing another game sometimes just to take your mind off of things is also something I do a lot. Like for instance, the other day I've played Uno with some friends, playing like things like Human Fall Flat with a friend. Like we're just like messing around, but it just takes my mind off thinking about Overwatch sometimes, especially after a bad day. They're the kind of things that I keep for balance. And to be honest, my job kind of fits perfectly into my Overwatch schedule. Thank God. So I don't necessarily really have that problem, especially because I work late. I do stuff late into the night for me, and then I get up whenever I feel like it, and people are still asleep, so I have time to do my own things as well. But scheduling is definitely a big one.
Thank you.
Next up we got Taki, and we will probably be accepting 4 more questions after this. Oh.
Alright, so I never really introduced myself. I'm a 3.4, 3.5k main tank who is coaching a 2.6k team. So I'm not exactly the most knowledgeable when it comes to the game, so I sometimes fall short in the coaching department because I don't understand every concept to the best of my ability. How did you guys get to the level of understanding the game?
Way too much time spent doing things coaching wise. Like at the start, I was just kind of overly eager to consume as much content as I could as well. Like, and having just, but when they say that, like thinking about it critically, like watching it critically rather than just kind of watching it as enjoyable stuff. A lot of it was just like listening to other coaches and then thinking about looking like really in depth. So like I said a bit earlier with the double bubble stuff, it's just kind of me sitting there thinking, picking bits apart that I do understand, and then kind of trying to blend it with the things I don't understand and see how they fit together. Okay, well I know Winston and Zarya shouldn't be a safe combo together at the time, right? So how are they making? What are their? You can always look at things like win conditions, and there's like a base thing that you can always look at, or like a base. Oh, and so I found that was the best way, is just to apply what I do know, and then kind of just, okay, how can I apply these base things to this new thing that I don't understand? And a lot of it is just experience, right? You'll teach one thing and then you'll think, okay, well, I could teach that better, and you'll teach it differently, or you'll see somebody else mention something that's important and then you'll change how you teach it.
Yeah, that comes from a lot of absorbing, right? So like I said, when I was relatively newish, I would get all the possible content I can get my hands on, network with all the coaches I can, get my hands on, absorb. I can't tell you how many hours I've watched of like Nather and Spilo, some quality content out there. And I took notes. I mean, especially like when a new meta happened and a new, Natter video came out, or Spilo, whoever else, John Galt's another quality one. Thor even has some good content out there. I would sit down with a notepad and I would write down and pick out, and a lot of what Sama said, mixing it into your own knowledge so you can better understand it, taking tidbits from all this different content, not copying verbatim with how someone coaches or their knowledge, but just picking out the concepts, taking notes, absorbing it, and then digesting it, right, and kind of rolling it out how you want to coach and your understanding for the game in general. But I will say, the more time you put into coaching, it shows. You put those hours in of watching quality content, it's going to show, as long as you're putting that conscious effort into learning the stuff.
Don't be scared to ask players who, I don't know, say like for you, I'm sure you know some players that are GM or whatever. Don't be scared to ask them for just like replay codes, and just like try and look at what they're doing as well. So I think looking at Owl personally, I'm not a fan of. I tend to recommend looking at contenders and trials and top OD, because it still shows that they have a lot of errors and you can spot the errors as well as what they're doing well. Whereas Owl, there's a lot of it's kind of weird mistakes that they make in the moment, rather than these big macro mistakes a lot of the time. So try and get hold of like when I don't know if any of you watch sport, but like when I watched the sport, when I was doing like my coaching courses, or refereeing courses for me, I'd look at games and like referee them myself, just randomly like shout at the TV. Or if you see like anything like if you see Monkey Bubble like production and they've got OD on, just watch it and like pick teams apart in your head, right? Like be critical of what you think they're doing wrong. I think you'll start to learn, or even just look at them and go, okay, well, what are they doing right? That means they've won 4 games in a row or whatever. Don't be scared to just, like, you have to also just consume content.
I think that definitely answers my question. Just more experience and looking at other people and critical analyzing of other VODs and stuff.
Sorry,
Like
say that
Thomas
again.
said. Go ahead.
Sorry, could you say that again? I didn't quite hear it with the ping.
Oh, I just said thank you.
Oh.
Oh, hello. I'm
Hello.
Leggett. So I've been coaching 2 teams for about 3 years now. One is around 2,300 and the other team is averaging about 38 right now, I believe. But I've gone through the whole phase of consuming as much media as possible. I'll be on Twitch just in the background watching as much as possible, like as much as I can. I'll watch YouTube videos. I'll ask some of my buddies who are top 500, like for VODs to review by myself just to see like how they play the game because they're obviously better than me. So my question is, I my two teams love to skirmish against each other, but my higher elo team is kind of toxic towards my lower elo team, but they still like to have the scrimmage, and my lower elo team gets kind of discouraged to learn from the higher elo team because they're kind of toxic. So how do I get rid of the toxicity between teammates?
In my opinion, I have a little bit of experience with this. I have a team A that's like 4-4-4-3, right? And I have a team B that's 2.6 at Fresno State. So what I do when I do in-house is I mix the squads up. So when in doing that, you actually like if you put your shot caller, your secondary shot caller with either someone that's vocal or even the high team shot caller, he learns a lot, right? You can mix it up. Them two can be together. Sure, the other team won't have a strong shot calling, but put more talented people on the other side, right? So you have talent versus a quality shot calling, and therefore your lower team can learn a lot about how the game should be played from a powerful shot caller. So that helps, and just mixing the talent up so they aren't toxic to each other, right? It's easy when you're rolling to be just toxic to a lower team, but if you split them up and you force them to go against each other, especially the people that are generally like naturally more toxic, you put them on a team that is probably a little less talented and you humble them up a little bit. I mean, there's a lot of kind of ways you can go about that.
You can also like balance the scrim just using the game itself, right? So you can say to, you know, if there's something that the higher team are practicing, set goals for the teams, that the things they're going to practice against each other, and then balance the game accordingly. So say you're, I don't know, one team's practicing like alt tracking, we'll have it so only the main support can talk, right? And you only get the alt tracking out and nothing else happens, right? You can hinder them while making them practice. Or even like you can just adjust the game settings, right? You can give one team more damage, get a team used to, you know, high spam comps, right? Trying like you can adjust the rules of that scrim, especially if they're two teams that you coach. Just like feel free to adjust the rules. Obviously, let people know that you're adjusting them, but adjust the rules, balance out the playing field a little bit, and obviously, like Metal said, you can mix people up.
Because it's not all about like teams necessarily improving, right? The lower SR team isn't going to improve from getting smacked down. The higher team isn't going to improve from smacking down. So if you mix it around, either how Simon said or how I said, it will help them improve overall.
And you could even throw in a curveball sometimes if you're really feeling really horrible, and you know just whack up the damage numbers for the lower team and get them to actually beat the higher team. So it gives the higher team something to think about as well. You know, why did we lose to these guys that we should never lose to and have never lost to before, right? Try and get that to happen, you know, on the sly if you want to. It could be a bit annoying, but again, if you're in control and you know all the players really well, then it's something you can do. It's just kind of curb the ego.
Yes, I completely agree. I've been trying to give my players challenges recently, like you said, but I'm struggling to come up with ideas. But I have another question. It's mainly for Mecca though. How is how is this week or however long this training session for the coaches? How is this going to play out? Like, what is the end goal, and what's going to happen in the time frame that we have, and like, what are your ideas of what we're going to do?
Tell you now, it speaks true. There is none. And the ones that there are, I can tell you now, I've got about 10 teams asking me to trial because there is literally barely any other coaches out there. And every team that I'm being asked to trial for, they have the same trial list of about 4 or 5 coaches at the moment. So anything new to the scene is always greatly appreciated because
And
it
I
means teams don't fall apart before they even start.
think you have an amazing roster here too. Like I think even between me and Sama, like you get a lot of the head coaching knowledge from me. It's something I focus on very heavily, investing in my teams. Being emotionally there for my players. In collegiate, you can't really just recruit from the nation, right? You have to work with your player base. So that means I am heavily invested in my relationships with my players. So I'm like heavily on the head coaching side. Of course, I know a ton about Overwatch. I can coach Overwatch, but Sama is a fantastic Overwatch coach in general. I'm not saying he's not, a head coach by any means, but you have a good mix of quality coaching here, what I think can help a lot of you improve quite quickly.
It's also, I feel like it's just to answer any questions you have. So for me, right, I still have questions that I'd love to get a panel of like top contenders and our coaches together and just ask some questions. And I still strive for that, but I think it's a good opportunity in the end goal for you guys just to it's a good platform for us to share our knowledge and you guys to ask us very direct questions instead of watching a stream and like hoping we answer a question that you had. I think that's probably a good end goal. It's just like answering every question that people have.
I feel like this is also a good place to meet other up and coming coaches so that we can all intermingle and meet each other, honestly.
Wholeheartedly agree.
Thank you. That's my last question. Thank you.
Okay, so I have a bit of a long question, but it's about like when you're in when you find a new team and it's plat or gold. Something I found a lot is teams that has like problems with hero pools and are kind of aimless, like saying there's a Reinhardt player, but then the main support only plays Mercy, and they can just kind of just do whatever. They're not like practicing anything specific, and it's kind of all over the place. And like, where do you start there? Like, yeah, that's more or less my question. You can go crazy.
So I worked with OT Pog, who are a team of one tricks, kind of like Avoided or similar, and I took them from OD into Gauntlet. So I think you have to play around people's hero picks. Definitely, like try and build a comp that kind of makes sense in heroes that have a similar style, but just if it's very differing styles. So we had an Orisa player and a ball player. So you can start thinking more creative, try and be a bit more creative and see what you can build off of that. Okay, well, I can combo 2 things. I can combo a pile driver and a pull, and I can have I can initiate some kind of like dive brawl that goes in off one of these cooldowns, or try and build a creative way. Think of just, for me, I started just blowing out tons and tons of like really weird comps that didn't make sense and thinking how I could make them make sense. But don't be scared to like try and play into people's hero pools, but have a base concept. So if the hero pool suits a kind of brawly style really well, they have a Reaper player, like a Kree player. Try and figure ways that you can incorporate that into a team comp. A lot of the time, even now, right, we have. I was working for Deus Chimpus. We had Genji one trick pretty much. Like you can work that around, and a lot of the times they're really comfortable in those heroes, and they're much better at them. So try and like build them into comps and try and think of creative ways that you can incorporate them, and then you can teach that one comp, right? So say it's like a Ryan and a Mercy, right? Okay, how can I incorporate that? Well, I can probably play, a kind of different style of comp. I can maybe ask the other players to look at what they can play as well. I think not being scared to experiment with these kind of teams is also really good. So I used to do a lot of testing of weird comps on bronze and plat gold teams, right? Just tell them to run some weird thing and see if they can execute it, right? If it's viable. Yeah, don't be scared to experiment, especially if you've got like players that are happy and want to experiment as well. Go crazy with it. That's what I've done in the past, is just like, rather than trying to conform players to strict comps, if they're good at one comp, they're good at one comp, and you should just like try to focus in on what they're good at.
I would completely agree. So what I would do is, the people that don't want to change, you can try to be creative with. The people that can change, or want to change and want to experiment, you can more focus on their champion pools and making sure, or their character pools and making sure that they can play multiple options. So for example, not this coaching clash, but the last coaching clash, I had a Genji one trick, and I ended up changing his mind over the course of time. When you make them kind of realize that, hey, you're kind of hindering. I mean, I wasn't aggressive with it, but over time, I just kind of let him, DM'd them and just messaged them and kind of helped them realize that you're really hindering our compositions, and being an overall well-rounded player can eventually help your progression much faster into the upper echelons, lower ones, right? Being a one-trick Genji can kind of only get you so far, especially within certain metas. So, but I still ran a quality comp that they love to run, right? That we were pretty good at double bubble. So I just said, well, let's do a double bubble cyber dive, and that ended up being one of our like quality comps that we would play, and it was still a very strong comp at that time. So there's a lot of different, like Simon said, there's a lot of creative ways you can come about and focus on those and building those up. But also don't, I wouldn't necessarily just let the player be okay with the player just one tricking. Really try to get into their head, make them know, that there's so much more artillery you could have as a well-rounded player as opposed to being just a one trick.
Thank you. Can I do a small follow-up question? What is with players that overflex, like they take way too many heroes and they are always swapping, and like what do you do with those type of players?
I've given a lot of like super flexible players, just given them a hero pool and just said, when you play ranked, play just these 3 or 4. Because they'll fit all situations pretty much. There is genuinely a kind of air to it where even if you're a full flex player, there's really ones that you will be good at. So try and give them a hero pool that you're aiming to go for. So say you're aiming to practice like ball comps, try and keep them to the more bally heroes, say only play these kind of heroes. A lot of players will advertise like flex or hit scan, so just keep them to what they advertised as well. Try not to over like flex people in general as well. I think people who flex a lot are really smart players as well. So maybe look to put them in a role where they can use more of the kind of like brain power, maybe like a main tank position or a flex DPS or like main support, or give them a role that'll allow them to express that full flex. Personally, I've come from a like full flex, right? So I used to specialize in main tank, but I've always been a kind of like, I can play everything in the hero pool to a good level. So I found somebody just giving me a hero pool saying focus on these heroes because we're going to do this really helps for like overly flexible players.
And also just getting to know your team. Like when you have, let's say, give an example like DPS. If the DPS are overflexing and playing whatever, that means you're not really necessarily sticking to the hit scan and projectile. And when assigning them, I would agree with assigning them, but it would be also, I've had situations where one DPS wanted to play flex in this very certain comp that we played. I was like, okay, but as long as you stick to that character every single time, we need it, right? So they end up just kind of over time as teams progress and mature together, they generally just know what they're going to play on each side of the board. Just don't let them, one tank play Diva once and then not play Diva the next scrim. No, you're going to play off tank, right? You're going to play the off tank pool. Same thing with DPS. Yes, they can swap around every once in a while, right? Double hit scan, yeah, sure, double flex, sure. But you have to stick if we're gonna play double flex, stick to that character. Don't swap over to the other character just because you kind of feel like it, right? We haven't practiced that. That doesn't feel comfortable as the team matures. So
Okay, thank you.
I have to make this a quick one. I need to get to scrims. Team a lot on that.
Okay, sorry. I'll try to make it quick. So if your team is having a lack of either support tank or DPS line during team-oriented VOD reviews, how do you approach that if they're kind of the glaring issue? Do you like harp on it? Do you call them out like once? Do you be honest and be like, this is the reason why you guys are being held back? How do you go about doing that? I found that very difficult.
I don't know. Solid probably has plenty to say about it, but I am not opposed to pointing players out. I'm just not opposed to I'm opposed to hammering a player and saying you're the reason we're losing this scrim, right? Like you're the reason we lost this entire game. Because that's not necessarily true. Nobody plays perfect. But it's okay to call out a player in a certain particular situation where they need to improve because then they can kind of self-reflect later on and be like, yeah, I really did throw that engagement. If they're consistently throwing the engagement over and over and over, I would suggest a one-on-one to really try to stop that from happening because you don't want an entire VOD to turn into microing a player's bad decisions repeatedly.
Okay, sweet. Again, I think it's, yeah, like I said before, I think it's based on your style and what people are used to, right? If people, right, for me, people are used to me being a bit more like hammering, a bit more kind of, I don't care about your feelings kind of thing. But if that's not really your style, then like, and people, or it's not the team style, right? So I have a player right now who the manager has told me try not to go overly hard. They're a bit more sensitive, and that's where you can adjust. Try and get to know players, obviously. You know, if they're akin to taking a hammering, then go for it, right? But if they're less so, try and look to say, okay, well, this was an issue, but we're going to ignore this issue, right? Tell them you're going to ignore it and address it another time in a one-on-one or through just a quick discussion after, right? Don't be scared to just like talk to your players actively and just say, hey, this was a problem, and then you see it again, and you just say, I'll ignore this positioning error this time, but so you know it's there. This is happening again, and this has happened again. I'll move on and pretend it didn't happen. I'll try and fix something else. Again, like we said before, try not to overly drill players.
Okay.
Unless it's a kind of learning curve, right? But again, just that kind of like some mistakes, especially lower elo, are worth ignoring, right? And pretending they don't exist and addressing them at another time. I don't, and there'll be lots of recorded VODs of me saying, I really don't care about this mistake, right? It's not important. So do look to think about what would be more important and don't be scared to ignore certain mistakes that you feel are not like big glaring issues, right? Or say, okay, I've seen this mistake. I know it's happening. Tell players, it's happening, and then go back to what you were focusing on.
Okay. Thank you.